Economics 115, the Survey of Economics, Unit 1. A few words before we delve into the first of the 9 circles. The book is not only mandatory, it is highly helpful. Now, I'm not going to be lecturing directly from the book. I'll be more taking key concepts and integrating them into the lectures. I'm also going to be presenting material that's not in the book, and these are fair game for test questions as well. I'm not going to be lecturing on every concept presented in the book. This doesn't mean that you won't see these questions on a test. So, fair warning. Economics is full of jargon, and you'd be very well served to take note of key terms both in these presentations as well as at the end of the chapters in the book. Now, for those of you that may have missed it, that is what economists call a hint. What is economics? Well, economics is the study of the allocation of scarce resources among competing and unlimited wants. Now, there are 3 key points in that short sentence: allocation, scarce resource, and competing and unlimited wants. With allocation, we got to figure out who gets what, how to fairly distribute these resources. Scarce resources, we do not live in a land of plenty. Every given resource is scarce, even the renewable ones. The fact that there is not an unlimited available supply of a thing makes it by definition scarce. Here in Southern Oregon, clean air is taken mostly for granted, but during fire season, you will see that clean air is a resource. Now, with scarce resources, there's got to be resources that are not scarce. Well, yeah, kind of, but no. Those things that are in unlimited supply at no cost really don't exist in a practical sense. Finally, competing and unlimited wants. I want as much of anything as I can get my hands on, and I'm betting you do too. So for any given resource, our wants may be competing. Our wants can be considered unlimited. Besides, who wants only one gold when you can have all of the gold? So now what? We've got to figure out how we are going to distribute the resources we have. We can do this in a number of ways. We can do one for each, like dealing a poker hand. We can give each according to his needs, like Karl Marx and later John Rawls, or we can use kind of a steel cage death match. But before we figure out how we're going to distribute our resources, we've got to back up and ask 4 specific questions. What will be produced? How will it be produced? Who will get the products? And when will those products be delivered? What will be produced? If producers are producing what the consumers don't want, they'll stop producing them. Even though the Betamax was technologically superior to the VHS, you don't see many Betamaxes around. Laserdiscs, Windows Millennium Edition, all of these items were created and the consumers did not want them. The next one is, how will it be made? By what means will the items be produced? Are they going to be done by hand, or is it going to be done by machine? You know, how do you want your burger cooked? Who will get the products? How will we decide who gets the goods and services? How do we decide? You know, think back to the steel cage death match. And when will the products be delivered? If you go to the coffee house stand on campus, you purchase the goods, they're delivered immediately. You go and buy a car, you sign a paper promising to pay, you get the car, and you're going to pay over time, usually anywhere from 5 to 8 years. If you put something on layaway, you're going to pay for it until it's completely paid off, and then you'll receive the goods after the fact. Now, in order to produce goods, you need not only to have a market for the good produced, you need to produce them somehow. Now, bear in mind, when I say products, I mean both goods and services. Economists don't make a distinction between goods as products and services as products. But remember I said we've got to figure out the somehow? Well, in economics, the somehow is the factors of production. Your book says there are 3 factors. There are actually 4. Land, labor, capital, and management. Land is a gift from nature. If you are building a hut, You will use land not only to build the hut on, but the wood to build the hut itself. Both the ground and the hut are land. Labor, the work that is needed to create the project. When writing programs for a computer, there are people who think up the idea, there are people who write the programs, debug the system, press the CDs, and package and ship the software. All of these are part of labor. Capital. Now, capital is divided into two separate categories. The first one is physical capital. These are the things that are used to create the product. This can be the donut machine, the computer farm at Facebook, or the actual hatchet that you use to cut the tree down to build your hut. There's also financial capital. This is the money. You've got to buy the grills, computers, and hatchets, don't you? Finally, there's management, what your book calls entrepreneurship. Do you think that if Zuckerberg hadn't taken a chance and dropped out of Harvard, that there would be a Facebook, or a Microsoft, or the Oprah Winfrey Network? The management is the kind of the take a chance aspect of production. Okay, how you doing so far? So far so good. I know it's a lot to digest, and I know it's kind of sort of feels like drinking from the fire hose. Watch the videos again. If you need to slow them down, take notes. Back to business. Everything has a cost associated. Cost is the concept that in order to get something, we have to give up something else. We divide cost into two groups. We divide it into explicit or real cost. This is the outlay of money for a product. This is the price on the price tag. A Happy Meal costs you $3.99. There are also opportunity costs or implicit cost. This is the cost of the next best option. What are you giving up in order to get the one thing? Now, real costs are set and determinable. Opportunity costs are a little more slippery. Let me give you an example. I recently took a week-long vacation down to Los Angeles. In this vacation, I had both real and opportunity costs. One of the opportunity costs of this vacation was that I was not able to work as a rideshare driver. So by not earning, I could have otherwise made money. This vacation, quote unquote, cost me $560.58. I stayed the week at my sister's house. While the real cost of this place was to sleep in my favor, because I didn't have to give any money to a motel, I had to sleep on a really uncomfortable fold-away bed and wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning when the kids got up and turned the TV on full blast. So the real cost, the real savings was I didn't have to pay for a hotel. The opportunity cost was, the price of a good night's sleep. How much is that worth? It's not all just about money. While I was down there, I went to a meeting of a Western Historical Society that I'm a member of. The dinner was paid for by a friend, and my adult beverages were paid for by another friend. But because this was a vacation, I had packed, shorts and a t-shirt. I had to go and spend money buying nice clothes to go to the meeting and driving in LA traffic. The opportunity cost was not being able to spend time with my family. So was it worth it? Did the costs outweigh the benefits? Let's slow down and digest that one. Every decision that you make has a cost associated with it, either a real cost or an opportunity cost. Which is more important, making money or spending time with my family? Which is more important, spending time with family or going to a meeting where I'd be able to see friends that I haven't seen for years? A word on models. Economists base all their theories and predictions on models. Now, models are extremely simplified views of actions and behaviors that economists use to explain the way the world works. We're going to use these models throughout the class, and we are also going to rely on certain assumptions, set facts, to make those models behave. Ceteris Paribus. Now, this is the Ceteris Paribus fairy, and he's going to be visiting us from time to time. Ceteris Paribus means all else being equal, or all other things being held constant. This is the concept that precedes every economic statement. All else being equal, this is going to happen. All else being equal, blah, blah, blah. Now, we know that nothing ever occurs in a vacuum, and there's never an instance where ceteris is always paribus. But without that assumption, nothing would ever get done, because we'd be so wrapped up predicting consequences and reactions, we'd be chess moving out into the future, that we'd tie ourselves up in a knot and not get anywhere. Rational self-interest. RSI is the perception of personal cost and benefit, and it's the guiding force behind a person's actions. People will act in a fashion that will benefit them, and this is based on reality as they perceive it. Investments, charity, purchasing, all things are based on RSI. I think that this is a wise investment, therefore I'm going to invest in it. I like this item and don't like the next item, so I bought this item. The assumption is also implicit that people are not going to do stupid things, but this, however, is not always the case. David Ricardo is the third of 17 children from a Sephardic Jewish father and a Quaker mother. You heard that right. He developed the concept of comparative advantage, the ability to produce goods or services at a lower cost than someone else. This is not just limited to labor, but it can be applied to land as well. The Rogue Valley is similar to only one other region in the world in terms of soil, climate, and weather, the French Riviera. There were two brothers named Holmes who were in the fruit business back in the early part of the 1900s. These two brothers found this similarity out and started growing fruit in the valley, mostly pears. They prided themselves on their pears, which were comparable to pears from only one other region in the world in terms of size, sweetness, and stuff like that, the French Riviera. So there's a comparative advantage at work here. The fact that some resources are absent or in limited supply worked to the Holmes brothers' favor. They found that they could market these pears internationally and that people would buy them. If every region of the world was able to produce pears, Harry and David Holmes would not nearly have been so successful. Now in the Rogue Valley, pears are giving way to grapevines. The soil, the climate, the weather is very conducive to growing vineyards full of wine-producing grapes. And we're also finding that our climate is conducive to marijuana and hemp farms. The southeast corner of the United States is also climatically ideal for growing cotton and tobacco. Cotton is able to be grown in other places, like India, but they don't have as good a climate for growing cotton. So the United States has a comparative advantage over the rest of the world when it comes to cotton production. Positive versus normative economics. So how do we determine efficiency and fairness? Remember, we need to allocate scarce resources among competing and unlimited wants. So we need to figure out the allocation in terms of efficiency and fairness. Two schools of thought have emerged. First one is positive. This is the way things are, looking at factual statements and approaching economics based on what is. The other school of thought is normative. This is the way things ought to be. Instead of looking at the facts, we look at the needs, we make judgments, we look into the future, and we approach economics based on what should be. The production possibilities curve. We need to answer the 4 questions and use the factors of production in order to determine the fair, efficient allocation of scarce resources among competing and unlimited wants. Now, we know things have a cost, and we could also assume that things have a value. If you pay the cost, that's the value you place on it. The value of a product, however, is different for you than it is for me. The workings between cost and value for each individual is done primarily to increase their own wealth, and wealth is defined as the moving of assets from lower to higher valued uses. It's very subjective and different for each person who comes across it. In economics, the answer to the what question is partly answered by a concept called the production possibilities curve. This basically means that the output of production throughout the economy reaches its limit at a certain place, And beyond this place, there be dragons. I mean, beyond this place, you cannot produce. The production possibilities curve assumes three things. That there is sufficient available resources. There's enough stuff to make everything we want. There's fixed technology. We have the tech available to utilize those resources in such a way that they will make what we want. And there's full employment. Everybody who wants to work is working, within a small percentage. Some people aren't working, some people aren't looking for work, so they're not counted in unemployment figures. The homeless, the disabled, full-time students, they're also not counted in employment figures. So everybody who wants a job has a job within maybe 3 or 5%. The production possibilities curve is not a fixed point. It's more of a range of options and opportunities. This blue line is the production possibilities frontier. Beyond this place, we cannot currently produce. Now, when we're producing at max efficiency, we are at anywhere on the curve, B, C, or D. When we're producing inefficiently, we're not using all of the technology resources that we have, we are at position A. And right now, given the technological and other resources we have, it is impossible for us to produce at point X. Now, the production possibilities frontier is not a fixed measurement. Over time, and with the discovery of new resources, developments of new technologies, and additions to the labor market, the PPC can expand. When the PPC expands due to an increase in any of the three considerations, there can be more of everything. The production possibilities frontier can also contract. War, disaster, mass casualty events, the Rona, all can reduce the number of resources that we have in order to create stuff. In economics, the classic example that every economics studies is the concept of guns and butter. The vertical line represents the possible production of butter in the United States, and the horizontal line is the amount of guns. The question is, how much guns and how much butter? We need to allocate resources, and we need to direct the factors of production in a certain direction. The Smith & Wesson factory cannot produce butter, and dairy farms aren't really useful in the manufacturing of 357s. So, we need to answer the question, what will be produced? The more guns we produce, the less butter will be produced. Now the consideration of who comes into play. Who will benefit by making guns, and who will benefit by making butter? Certainly we need to eat, but we also need to maintain security against our enemies, foreign and domestic, don't we? Looking at the world in 1983, we had a need, some might argue, for more guns than butter. Looking at the world now, we see that we don't have any real big enemies, but we have a bunch of little ones. To put it another way, you can either read or you can work. You cannot do both within your current personal production possibilities curve. If you exclusively read, you won't have time to work at all. If you work all the time, you will have no time to read. But if you read some and work some and play some, you'll be underutilizing your production possibilities. So what you need to do is you need to figure out the costs and place value on all of your decisions. Can you expand your PPC? Yes, you can. Can your PPC contract? It sure can. Back to guns and butter. Now, there is not an even trade-off. For every movement along the frontier, there's a loss of productivity. This cost has to be taken into account when we determine the what. And the reason that there's a loss in productivity is because we've got to retrofit the dairy farm in order to make the block. We need to retrofit the Smith & Wesson in order to make heavy cream. Now, of course, the best of both worlds, in terms of guns and butter, there are some terms that I need you to know. Money. Money is whatever we say it is. Money is a commonly accepted medium of exchange. Little colored pieces of paper are money in the context of the game Monopoly. It has value and can be used to buy goods and services. At Disney resorts, Disney dollars are worth face value. But you can't go and spend a Disney dollar down at the local 7-Eleven. However, there are some stores in Anaheim and in Orlando that will take Disney dollars as currency because they know that it's real easy just to pop over to the Disney lot and trade in the cash for American money. This is a $100 trillion note from the Bank of Zimbabwe. I've got one of these. I am a 100 trillionaire in Zimbabwe if this were still money. Back in Zimbabwe in 2008, the economy was in such bad shape that there was such inflation that they had to print a $100 trillion note. These were taken out of circulation, and I bought mine on eBay for 10 bucks. Barter is the exchanging of goods and services without using money as a middle means. The butcher and the fisherman set their values based on what they perceive it to be. Again, this is rational self-interest at work. The butcher feels that this ham hock is worth the fish that the fisherman is going to give him. If there's an imbalance, there will be no trade. In Monopoly, when you land on Boardwalk and have no cash, you have to trade in a property for your stay. The property is not money as such, but it has value both in real and opportunity costs. If you have the only property that's going to keep the other person from making their own monopoly, then maybe that value is greater than just the regular price tag on the Monopoly board. Fallacy of Composition. What's good for some is not necessarily good for everybody. If a few do it, it may be beneficial. If everybody does it, there's no game. The last Dodger game I was able to go to, I saw this picture. Now, the woman in blue is having a hard time seeing, so what she did is she stood up. As soon as she stood up, she had a better view. But when the play was made, Kobe decided to stand up, and now she has a blocked view. What was good for her is not good when everybody does it. A post-hoc fallacy. This is the confusion between things that happen at the same time, coincidence, and things that happen because of something else, cause and effect. For instance, Chuck Norris was born on May 6, 1945. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered in World War II. Now, what's the difference between micro versus macroeconomics? Microeconomics is the choices made by consumers, firms, and how those decisions affect a market for a particular good. Macroeconomics is a 30,000-foot view of a nation or a global economy as a whole. Last thing I want to talk to you about is this little triangle. In economics, we use the symbol triangle to indicate there's been a change in something. Now, when you see percent triangle, that means that we are indicating a percentage change as opposed to a raw number change. You are going to be seeing this crop up throughout the course.